Hello and welcome our dear friends to the Zonneglossis YouTube channel. In a few moments from now I will speak again with Dr. Dean Radin, and this time it's about electronic voice phenomena and more interesting paranormal subjects. Let me introduce myself. My name is Lonneke Kersten. I'm a paranormal researcher at Zonneglossis in the Netherlands. I can say that my whole life is in service of the spiritual world. I'm 62 years old now. I'm the author of 2 books, which are now being translated into English, and I worked as a nurse until a few years ago. I also worked as a mental and deep trance medium and trance healer. For the last 3.5 years, I sit in the experimental home circle called Terra Mystica for development of physical phenomena. So far about me, and we are waiting and looking forward to Dr. Dean Radin.
Hello.
Hello, Dean. Welcome. Participants of the Home Circle and Experimental Group are here as well.
Very good.
Yes, you can see maybe 2 of them sitting on the couch behind me. Hello.
Yeah.
That's Eva and Siska.
Hello.
And there are more. I will show you. I will try. It's all experimental, isn't it? There they are. I don't know if you can see them.
Yes.
Jullie kunnen even dag zeggen.
Ja, hallo. Hallo.
Hello.
We are very excited to be able to talk to you again about the subject of consciousness and the many different aspects and approaches and ideas of this subject. Dean, you are, I may call you Dean?
Sure.
Okay. Dean Radin, you are Chief Scientist at the Institute of Noetic Science and a Distinguished Professor at the California Institute of Integral Studies. You're the author of 4 popular books who are translated in 15 foreign languages. The first book was called The Conscious Universe, the second one Entangled Minds, the third one Supernormal, the 4 Real Magic, and now I believe you're working on a book that's maybe called Practical Magic. Am I right?
I'm thinking about writing it. I haven't actually started writing anything yet.
Oh, really? Really? You are already busy with it, aren't you?
I'm busy with so many things that I need to be careful how I use my time.
Yes, you're right. It's flying. I would like to start our conversation by lighting 3 candles. And they have a symbolic meaning. Do you feel okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. I will ask Siska to lit the first candle. The first candle symbolizes the oneness that we are in consciousness, or you can say in spirit, but this is the symbol of the first candle. The second candle symbolizes the light of our consciousness. With this candle we express the wish to learn more and to understand more about this first candle. Als je wil.
Ja.
And the third candle symbolizes the unconditional love, because only with this love in our hearts we can understand more and more about the previous candles. And the message of these 3 candles is the intention of our conversation today.
Very nice.
So let's start. And the topics for this conversation are the following. The oneness, that we are in consciousness, or in spirit if you like. The EVP, the electronic voice phenomena, of which I sent you an example on your request.
Mm-hmm.
Forms of telepathy, of which mediumship, EVP and ITC is a direct result, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start to talk about the oneness of the referring to the first candle. I know it's not so easy to talk about, but can you explain it from your own sense of intuition or feeling?
Well, my first book was called The Conscious Universe, and the reason why it got that name or that title is because once you come to an understanding that psychic phenomena are real,
Yes.
clairvoyance and precognition and psychokinesis and so on, then you begin, the next question that normally comes up is how do we How do we begin to understand those kinds of experiences? And so it's very difficult to understand how somebody can perceptually get information about something on the other side of the universe through something like clairvoyance when you use models that are based on things like radio. All of our models are mechanistic and materialistic. That's how we're doing this. Skype is purely materialistic concepts and ideas. But it doesn't work very well. Those ideas don't work well in trying to understand the nature of consciousness and what it can do. Mm-hmm. And it leads you eventually to a different philosophical way of understanding reality. So are we machines made out of meat? Or are we that plus something else? And the something else looks like consciousness in general. And then consciousness that is not limited by space and time. It seems to be prior to space and time, in which case it doesn't exist in any one place or any one time. Mm-hmm. So automatically, when you just logically take that idea and expand it, we're talking about an entire universe which is floating in a sea of consciousness. And all of us are part of that consciousness.
That's what I want to say, yes.
Yeah, so we are all part of one gigantic consciousness, which in my latest book I spell consciousness with a capital C to distinguish it between the consciousness of the individual, which is with a small c.
Yes, of course.
So we are both.
We are both.
We are both individuals and a collective at the same time.
And part of the big consciousness.
Right.
Yes, we're working with our ego here on Earth, with all the tools we have to accomplish what we want to accomplish, but still we are a part of that consciousness. Yes, that's I believe as well. Yeah. And it's very difficult to get a hold on that, to get proof of that.
Well, and our everyday lives are constantly reminding us that we're separate.
Absolutely.
But phenomena that we call psychic or mystical remind us that it's actually that the feeling of separateness is kind of an illusion.
Absolutely, yes.
Right? It's not illusion in the sense that it's not real.
No.
But in the sense that we seem to be hardwired as humans to, in order to survive as an organism, we have to operate as though we're separate. And it's just very easy then to forget that, yes, we are partially separate, but not completely.
On a certain level, we're not. So,
right.
So maybe we are separate in the way that we can achieve things separate from each other to achieve our goals in life. But on a certain level, if you can say frequency level, we're connected with others. And it doesn't matter if it is our neighbor or while we are talking, or the deceased. We all had this consciousness where we walked on when they walked on Earth, and I believe they still have. They are aware with their minds.
Well, the connections that we're talking about are not in space or time.
No.
They're somehow outside of space and time.
Yes.
And it doesn't just include humans. Of course, it includes literally everything.
Everything that's life. Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah. So it takes a certain degree of talent, I would say, for people to experience that directly. Not everyone, even though I think it's real in general, not everyone can sense it the same way. So some people are simply more talented than others.
Absolutely, and maybe some people have the a possibility in themselves to experience certain things that others don't.
Right.
And why they are maybe they're blocking it with their minds of thoughts, and maybe it's just not possible. I don't know.
I think some of it is there are also genetic reasons that every culture in history has stories of people who are psychic who come from families who are psychic.
Yes.
And sometimes it jumps a generation, but it nevertheless suggests that there's a genetic basis.
Yes.
So one of the projects we're working on is to use the tools of modern genetics to look at the genomes of people who are psychic from psychic families and comparing it to people who don't report anything psychic. And we have found a difference in the genes themselves.
Okay, this is amazing.
Yeah. So we have a paper that's being reviewed now for publication in which we describe the genetic sequence that we found. And we think that we kind of found it by accident, because normally when you do a genetic analysis, you're looking at the portion of the DNA that's called coding.
Yes.
It's the portion that codes for proteins.
Okay.
And that turns out to be about 5% of the DNA. So 95% of our genetic codes do not code for protein. And for a long time, people called it junk DNA because they didn't know what it was for. It didn't seem to do anything. Well, now we understand that it's extremely important. It's probably the reason why humans are among the most intelligent creatures on Earth. That the non-coding portion of the DNA is involved in things like epigenetic expression. So you can have the potential to do something, but until the epigenetics turns on, the gene won't do that. Well, that's not in the coding portion. So what we found as the difference then between the psychics and non-psychics was in the non-coding portion of the DNA. So it's not the part of it that creates our bodies, but creates, in a sense, the way that we behave. Or another way of thinking of it is the way that we express our potentials. There's a different set of genetic material in people who are naturally psychic than ones who are not naturally psychic. So
let's say, if I understand you a little bit, there are people who are especially very good with numbers, and who express that in their work or in their science. And there are people who are less creative with numbers, but creative in another way. Can you say that? And some of them has it both, no? Right.
Yeah, so much of that has a genetic basis. But the same is true for talent in sports and talent in music. It's not 100% genetics. It's also early childhood training and all that. But at least when it comes to something as relatively subtle as psychic ability, there too, we find there's actually a genetic basis which predisposes somebody to be talented in that domain or not.
So our genes, our material, our body, we need that also to access certain capabilities with the mind.
Well, so as a metaphor, and purely as a metaphor, I would say that there are aspects of our bodies which may act as antennas to be able to receive things that if you don't have the antenna, you don't get it.
Exactly. Or if you doesn't point it to the right direction. Yes, right. And maybe you can tune it during, by example, I noticed that sometimes you achieve more and more and more by practicing also, even if you have these talents. So maybe the antenna is getting more in the right direction.
For people who have, and remember, this is a metaphor, right? It's not literal, but for people who have the capacity to tune the antenna, they can be trained. Yes, but some people don't have that.
No. I noticed that. That's absolutely so. I heard you also talking about this, let's say, non-local consciousness, if I am right. So we are part of this non-local consciousness. We all are, aren't we?
Right. So that is saying the same thing as consciousness not being in, or at least not being bound or constrained by space or time.
Exactly.
That's what it means.
Yes. But while we're talking. Of course, I have also questions from all kind of people on my paper, but I'm not using them at the moment. We're talking, and I'm thinking about what I believe is we are part of this great consciousness, what I believe we are, this non-local consciousness. I know that there is possible to connect with another person on this planet and to get information from each other, or to transmit pictures and so on. When we see each other, there is a kind of information that goes one to another. So at the moment that you have seen someone, then the world is different in a way if you meet another. Can you understand me?
I would say yes and no. So yes, in the sense that when you form an emotional bond with somebody else, it makes it easier to have the kind of communication that you're talking about. But that connection was always there.
Yes, absolutely. Even if you don't know.
Right. So the interactions that we have with others are ways of helping to focus our attention in the right direction.
Absolutely.
But the interconnections that we're talking about have to always be there, because otherwise we're talking about something like a radio, and that's not the way that this works.
No, it's not. No. Does physics, the physics of this time, does it connect with these ideas? Can they integrate these ideas?
We're looking toward a kind of physics that will come about in the next 50 years or so. It's whatever is past quantum mechanics, because physics is not finished. We're going to need something that is even more, a better description of the physical world than quantum mechanics. But at least quantum mechanics is going in the right direction.
Some aspects will be recognized through science.
I think so. I mean, if you go back far enough in time, everything was understood in terms of spirits.
Yes.
Because that's all we knew. But as science has progressed over the last 400 to 500 years, a lot of things that used to be considered purely as a spiritual phenomenon, including everything from the weather to our bodies to all kinds of things, well, we're beginning to understand how it works from a different perspective. That doesn't mean that ancient esoteric ideas are wrong.
No.
It's just that the language that was used and the concepts that were used were more along the lines of metaphor or analogy, whereas today science more or less rests on mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a more precise way of describing and predicting the way that the world works. And I think we will get to that point eventually in science for describing what today we would call spiritual. And we call it that because we don't know what else to call it. And so we use words like spiritual to express this transcendent feeling.
Yes, it's a little bit
Science has not caught up to that yet.
No.
Magic and spiritual are both words that are used to point to this transcendence feeling, where we don't have precise words yet.
No.
But I think we will.
Yeah.
And by the way, that one of the reasons sometimes people say, well, they don't like the idea that spiritual concepts will one day be described by science, because it seems to lessen it, like it reduces the mystery of spirituality. Mm-hmm. And I would say you don't have to worry about that, because there are so many mysteries in the universe that we will never catch up to all of them.
Absolutely. And in the deep sea even, we know so little about so much.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But everywhere we start somewhere, and we will learn step by step.
Yeah.
Have you done experiments, research, where you collected data that proves for you that there must be a non-local mind?
Non-local mind, yes.
Yes, that influence. That's my question.
Okay, yes. So every experiment in parapsychology is an experiment in non-local mind. So experiments in telepathy, so mind-to-mind connection, that suggests that your mind is not being created by the brain, or at least it's not being completely created by the brain. Some of our cognition and memory and perception, it is being produced in the brain.
Yes.
But that's not all there is. So when we do an experiment where we have two people mentally connect from a distance, we're not talking about signals passing between two brains. We're talking, because they're isolated very strictly, yes. We're talking about information that somehow gets from one mind to the next. So those kinds of experiments have been done since around the 1920s. So we have 100 years of experiments using many different methods to show that people can interact in a telepathic way.
Yes, like remote viewing, for example.
Well, remote viewing is still something different again.
Okay.
So telepathy is mind to mind.
Yes, yes, of course. Remote viewing, you don't need another mind. Yes, I understand. Yes.
So we have also a century of experiments looking at clairvoyance, also called it's the same thing as remote viewing, just a different term.
Yes.
The clairvoyance is the mind can get information from the environment without having another mind there.
Yes.
So that's just getting it directly somehow. Precognition is getting information from the future. Retrocognition is getting it from the past.
Yes.
Psychokinetic effects are using your intention to affect something physical at a distance.
Yes.
So the something physical at a distance can be an object. It could also be human physiology. And it could be human behavior even.
Yes.
So in each one of these classes, there have been many experiments published. And the methods that are used to evaluate them are the same that are used in conventional psychology and sociology and so on. So the same techniques are used to run the experiments, to evaluate them, and publish them in scientific journals.
Absolutely.
So each class of experiments demonstrates that somehow the mind is not just inside your head, but it's spread out.
Yes, you're absolutely right. 2 years ago, because we're speaking about this, I sent an email to a neurobiologist, Professor Dick Swaap, I don't know if you've ever heard that name, who wrote a very thick book, and it was We Are Our Brain. And I asked him if he could tell me something about, if I could tell him something about my years of semi-scientific EVP research at that time, and if he wanted, I could demonstrate that the human being is not the brain but uses it. And the answer of this professor was that our thinking is too far apart, and because of this we can never meet.
Maar heeft de wetenschapper nog iets te melden aan de fabrikant, zeg maar?
Ja, er is mij een keertje gevraagd als ik God tegen zou komen, wat ik hem dan zou vragen. Ik heb gezegd, in eerste instantie zou ik hem om zijn identiteitsbewijs vragen. Want er zijn wel meer mensen die mij vertellen dat ze God zijn. Dat gebeurt nogal eens. Of de God der goden. Maar stel me dat dat zo is, dan zou ik hem meenemen in eerste instantie naar een kinderkliniek. En de aangeboren afwijkingen laten zien. En dan zou ik hem vragen waarom. Waarom? Als hij daar een goed antwoord op heeft, dan zou ik hem meenemen naar een verpleeghuis. En laten zien hoe mensen aan het eind van hun leven zeggen alles wat menselijk is verliezen. En dan zou ik hem weer vragen waarom. En als hij daar een goed antwoord op had, dan zou ik hem meenemen naar een plaats waar ik nog niet naartoe wil gaan. En ik weet niet of ik er ooit naartoe wil gaan. Dan zou ik hem meenemen naar Auschwitz. En dan zou ik hem weer vragen waarom. Dus ik heb hem niks te melden, ik heb hem wat te vragen.
Maar u neemt hem niet mee naar de wieg van een baby? Of naar het bed van twee geliefden? Of naar een speeltuin waar kinderen spelen?
Nee, want daar hoef ik geen waarom te vragen.
He is professor in the Netherlands and China, and in the Netherlands alone he sold more than 450,000 copies of that book. And imagine, Dean, if this professor discovered that this aspect is not at all the way he thought it was. And by the way, the book otherwise is an excellent book, a very valuable book. But this aspect, we're talking about it, it's so far away from so many scientists, isn't it?
Well, that's the mainstream idea. The mainstream idea is that we are machines made out of meat. And that's the end of the story. That's it. And this comes out of the philosophy that drives not only modern science, but much of the modern world, which is materialism. Materialism is the idea that everything is made out of matter and maybe energy, including your brain, and your brain then produces consciousness. That's what neuroscientists are taught today. And this is one of the reasons why the number of people like myself who are doing research on what we can call extended human capacities, like extension of mind through space and time, there's only about 100 of us around the world who do this.
Really?
Because there's no funding for it.
There's no funding.
Because it's a major challenge to the prevailing idea in science. Now, I think it's important to say that when somebody says that you are literally your brain, which is the mainstream idea, some of that is correct. Because the brain is a kind of information processing system. And we do have information coming in through our senses, and we have memory, and it's all related to your body and your brain.
Yes.
The question is that all it is? Is there anything else going on? Well, the research that my colleagues and I do show that no, we are more than simply our brain. If, however, you come from the position where you believe strongly that you and your brain are the same thing, that prevents you from paying attention to research that you don't want to pay attention to. So even though there's a substantial amount of evidence for clairvoyance and telepathy and so on, they won't look at it. And if they do look at it, the usual opinion that you will then see is it only can be explained in two ways. It either has flaws, so that it's not very good, or it's fraud. It's made up. And so that's how they'll see the papers and the research that we publish, and that gives them a good excuse to not pay attention to it. And this is what happens in the mainstream. And it's not just for psychic phenomena. There are many areas in science where there are what amounts to a dogma for a way that is accepted understanding of something. And sometimes that's correct. Sometimes it's not so correct.
No.
In this case, it is partially correct that you are your brain. It's just not 100% correct.
It's not, no. And if you pronounce the way you say you are your brain, then when you die, you will lose a part of you, and you're not losing a part of you. So, in my opinion, so
right, but from a mainstream perspective, when you die, that is the complete end of it.
That people doesn't want to know more about it because they're occupied with everything else they want to achieve and are doing in life and their own science and so on. But it's all about yourself. About we have knowledge of our hands, our brains, our feet, how we are. We want to know that. We know the physiology, and so on. And this, what you truly are, what you also are, what you truly are, is most interesting. How we use this body on this time on Earth. It's unbelievable that they don't want to hear about it, and all the aspects of it. It's so many aspects of the mind. And it's really unbelievable. For
It
me.
is very strange. Yes.
It's so strange. I
So
hardly can understand this.
Well, so part of it is historically the relationship between science and religion. So religion has provided stories that do address other aspects of our lives. Some people are perfectly fine with those stories.
Yes.
Others find it more difficult to simply accept something on faith, in which case they will look towards their experience as the arbiter of what they will accept to be true.
Yes.
So if somebody is experiencing aspects of what religion talks about, because within religion all of the psychic phenomena are well accepted, and if you personally experience something like telepathy or clairvoyance or whatever, you will then look at the scientific dogma and say, well, they're missing something. A fair number of scientists are religious too. So they compartmentalize. It's like they become schizophrenic, and part of them say, well, I have to behave in this way, even though personally I believe this way. And so there is a split, and the split has been around for a long time between a scientific way of understanding reality and a personal way of understanding reality.
Yes, absolutely. And
scientists many scientists actually are not really that free to talk about what they personally believe. Because just like with any social enterprise, there are things you can talk about and things you can't talk about. It is very difficult in the academic world.
Yes.
And probably more so in the Netherlands than other places because of a very, very strong rationalistic way of regarding reality.
Yeah, absolutely. It's changing, but it is. It's changing so much that it reminds me also of something that I didn't plan to tell you. But I was at the last appointment of my cardiologist, the doctor of the heart. How you call it? Cardiologist, yes?
Cardiologist.
Cardiologist, yes, exactly. And it was our last meeting because he's going to retire. And so I thanked him for everything, and I'm doing very well, and so on and so on. And then when we left, he wanted to have a little chat, sort of nice goodbye chat. And then he said, by the way, Mrs. Kersten, there is a lot going on with the heart, and it is so interesting. But I learned so much. I truly know that we people have a soul and that we will survive death. And I said to him, I didn't tell him I was a medium or doing this kind of research. I said, you don't mean that. How is that possible? I can't believe what you're saying. Tell me about it. Then he was trying to explain himself, and he was really doing very much his best. And then I helped him, and I said, you're telling it to someone that really knows that it's true. But would you mind to speak out publicly about this? Oh, he said, yes, but my colleagues, what do they think? I said, what do you care? You have done your work. Everybody appreciates you very much for it. So why not? We have one cardiologist, Pim van Lommel. He's very famous in the Netherlands, who wrote books. I said, maybe you can also bring it out. And he said, I think in January I give you a call. Maybe I have to. I will think it over. I must try to do so. So I hope he will.
Great.
But indeed, it was amazing that he was speaking about it at that moment. And also amazing that everybody is so afraid, as you told us.
See, he would never do that until he retired.
Yeah, never. Of course not.
Yeah.
Because his credentials, everything, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely so.
Well, and it's the same with Pim, right? Pim didn't talk about any of this stuff until after he retired too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he explains a lot also without having so much personal experiences, but he noticed so much around him that he is sure of what he is explaining and telling. And that's wonderful. And you yourself had a wonderful experience with the synchronicity. I heard that again tonight before our meeting, how it went with your laboratory, how this synchronicity happened. Can you explain it for the viewers? Maybe in a short way, but explain what happened.
This was back in the year 2000, I think. Yeah, it was 2000. My colleagues and I were looking for office space in Silicon Valley, and it's always difficult to find space there. So we were looking at a variety of places. We finally found one in a suburb of Silicon Valley. And then after being there for about a month, we discovered, and we were doing cyber search. PSI is the short term for psychic, so we were doing cyber search. Our name was called Boundary Institute, so we didn't have anything that indicated visually what we were doing. But about a month after we moved into our new offices, we discovered that the people next door to us, because we were in a place that had a lot of different offices, there was a sign that said PsyQuest Labs. PsyQuest Labs, which we thought was a funny coincidence because we were doing cyber search and the people next door are doing PsyQuest, whatever that was. We had no idea what it was. And so I knocked on the door because I just wanted to meet the neighbors and ask them what they do, but there was nobody there. So another month goes by, and one day I walk to work in a different way and I pass a business called PsyQuest Inc., meaning incorporated. And I thought, oh, okay, these are the people who have the laboratory, which is next to our office.
Yes.
But no one was in there either.
No.
So I still didn't know what it meant.
No.
So every day from that point on, I knocked on the door next to us to find out who they are and to introduce ourselves. Finally, almost another month goes by, and I see there's somebody in there. So I knock on the door. I prepare to introduce myself, and a man comes to the door and opens it and is like frozen. He looks at me and he's like frozen in shock. And I didn't know what was happening. I thought he was having a heart attack or something.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And finally, what it turns out is that PsyQuest was a psychic research laboratory, but from a commercial perspective, a business trying to use psychic phenomena for various things. And his laboratory was right next to our offices.
Yes.
So in our offices, what I was doing was designing a laboratory that we would put into our office and drawing it on a board on the wall. Well, that wall is adjacent to the office next door. So finally, this guy named John, he invited me in, and he was amazed that I was there because he had been doing for the previous month a Tibetan dream yoga method. In which you go through periods of 3 hours that you're awake and 3 hours that you're asleep, and back and forth. For 24 hours you do this. Okay. And the idea is that after you go through 3 or 4 of these cycles, it becomes more and more difficult to distinguish between whether you're awake or dreaming. And so you keep holding the intention that you want. You want to manifest something into the world. He wanted to manifest me. And I said, what do you mean you want to manifest me? He said, I want you to somehow show up because I would like you to be on the board of directors for my company. But I didn't know where you were or how to contact you. I just wanted you to show up. So he opens the door, and there I was.
Wow, what a great job he did.
So he was shocked, and then he invites me in to see his laboratory. And then I was shocked because what I had been drawing to be our laboratory was already in his laboratory on the other side of the wall.
It's such an amazing story. It's unbelievable.
So it's a series of synchronicities, which in retrospect, you can say both of us were involved for about a month. Very strong intention. I wanted a laboratory. He wanted me to show up.
Yes.
And it's almost like a gravitational force that pulls these strong intentions together.
Yes. Now I hear it again, and it's...
Did you work together?
Yes, my daughter asked, did you work together?
We did. It turned out at the same time that we established this connection was when the dot-com crash occurred. So a lot of companies went out of business. The ability to raise money completely disappeared in Silicon Valley. So if we were able to continue raising money, we would have continued to work together, but we couldn't.
Okay.
So it was just a matter of bad timing in terms of the economy, and we ended up going our own ways.
Okay.
Kind of indirect introduction into manifestation magic.
Yes.
Because both of us were doing kind of rituals to make something happen.
Okay.
And it did.
Yeah.
And it did in a very unusual way, because we're well aware of everybody in the world who is doing this kind of research. And we would never have guessed, not only that somebody was creating a company to do this, but they would be located right next to us.
Yes.
That's like impossible.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So nothing is impossible. That's absolutely so, and that's what we call synchronicity, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a meaningful coincidence.
Yes. If
Yeah.
that's yes. By the way, I asked my spirit friends before we started to talk something that I can take with me for tonight. And then I had contact, and I know it was with my mother. It's not so important. There are more things said, but I haven't heard it yet. And they said there is not we don't know. They said literally, we don't know coincidence. That was. I thought, oh, but you can also in Dutch we say, het valt je toe. Hoe zeg je dat? Coincidence is it is synchronicity. It comes to you. You know, the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like coincidence to us when we can't explain how it happened.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If you come looking from a different perspective, you can see exactly how it happened. In
Yes.
which case, it's not coincidence at all.
No, that's so. Do you think that if not only scientists but general people can understand more about your research and your experiments and the underlying laws of nature, if they are very interested, do you think there will be people that want to work with it themselves more than they do now?
Probably. Although many scientists privately already believe in these kinds of experiences because they have them. They just don't talk about them.
Yeah.
So working with, as in my idea of practical magic, that would be a matter of, once you get to the point where you can understand that they're real, the next thing people want to do is, well, what do I do with it?
Exactly.
Well, that is practical magic. And so one of the reasons why I'm a little reluctant to go into that domain is because there's very little research on this. There's a huge amount of lore. I mean, the magical literature is gigantic. There's hundreds, thousands of volumes on this, but very, very little research. So I'm thinking now I might postpone writing that book until I have a chance to actually do some research and find out what works best for given people. Because people are different, they have different interests, different abilities, and so no one magic spell, let's put it that way, is going to work for everyone.
No.
You have to customize it.
Absolutely. And you're not afraid that people will misuse it when it becomes more known?
I think people are using magical methods all the time, whether they know it or not.
Yes.
It is true that the idea of gaining more power for many people is seductive, and usually seductive in not a very good direction.
Yes.
So that, yes, I have thought of that, and I think maybe one of the reasons why historically magical methods were kept secret is specifically to keep it out of the hands of people who would otherwise abuse it. So that may be what's going on too.
And you know, people can misuse everything, even a fork. You can eat with it and you can make it a weapon.
Yeah.
So people will
any
do
form
it.
of power can be used or abused.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, there are always, it's so. And then there are a lot of people who could use it for the good purpose, and they believe because of the church, and I respect the church, don't mistake my, that they think it's work of the devil.
Right.
And Yes.
Yeah, but traditionally a lot of magical methods were about healing.
Mm-hmm.
Probably mostly about healing, but as a technique, it could be used for all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So, yeah. So I mean, even in my book Real Magic, I was already warning people about getting too enthusiastic about magic is to be regarded with caution, because people are drawn to black magic. Black magic meaning that you're overriding somebody else's free will, and that's a no-no.
No.
And people have to be reminded of that all the time, because a lot of the purposes of magic that people use is to override other people's free will. In fact, if you look at the lists of spells, you get a grimoire and look at the spells, probably about half of them are about love and sex.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is about trying to override somebody else's wishes. And that's black magic. That should not, that has consequences.
Yes, it's a wrong way of using the power.
Yeah.
And I must say, in every aspect of the work that I'm involved in, I am connecting with this. I know it's a difficult word to hear for a lot of people, the word love, but this unconditional love is the first attunement and intention that I truly have to bring myself in that harmony, to bring forward what I want, what I want to try to bring forward for the good purpose, in my belief. And I think this intention is so important in this. And intentions can be very different of people, of course. So the results also. And that's the part of it that frightens me if I truly think about it. Another way, I don't want to be frightened by anyone and what happened, or historical, or all these kinds of awful things that are happening even today a lot. So I try to focus on this unconditional love, because I'm absolutely sure that this is the greatest power, and all the time at the end it will win. And maybe not for our eyes, or not that we can notice during our life, most of the time we can, but it always will survive, this unconditional love. So if someone's hurting another, they're hurting themselves. I believe that, absolutely. Yeah. And with this work, to achieve more of this so-called unconditional love that is there, therefore the intention is so important. But not only the intention, by example, and we will talk about this EVP and the ITC if you like, also in that work, it's so important to know how do I feel today before I do this experiment. Because I'm also every day not the same, maybe not even every hour. So the psychological effects of myself, how do I feel today, what are my emotions, is important. And most of the time I meditate before, or I harmonize my feelings before. And I do, everyone has his own way, and I do a prayer and so on, to bring myself in that atmosphere, that frequency, so to speak. And if I do well, then the results are much better. So this is, I believe, also why we can't repeat an experiment exactly the same time the next time. Because I am in a few moments different than I'm now. And we're using our machine, our feelings, our brain, our mind, our emotions. So
this of course is well understood in conventional psychology. We have to do experiments in psychophysiology and psychology and medicine in general over and over and over again with lots of people, because of what you were saying. People are not the same from one minute to the next.
No.
And you might be able to do something exceptionally unusual one day and then not do it again for a month.
Yes.
So it's true. You have to take into account the flexibility of people being able to perform.
Yes.
Which when you think about it then, to demonstrate something relatively subtle as telepathy in the laboratory, the fact that we are able to do that, even with all the variations in psychology from one minute to the next, is astounding. It means that these telepathic connections are actually quite robust. They're not as weak as people think they are.
No.
Because the vast majority of experiments on telepathy have used college sophomores. So that's like second year in college. And so psychology students, certainly in the US, maybe in the Netherlands too, will do experiments for credit as part of their psychology course. So we'll get 2 people who volunteer, bring them into the lab, they do the experiment, and then they may have had no interest in this at all.
Okay.
They're just doing it for college credit, and they can still demonstrate it on average.
Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah, amazing.
So we know that this is one of the reasons why we can have even higher confidence that these phenomena are real, because you don't need special people to do it.
No.
You just have to go ahead and try the experiment, and with enough people involved, you average out all of the variations in the individuals, and you can see what's left over, and what's left over are psychic phenomena.
Absolutely. And it's, by example, also the ITC, the pictures that appear in water or crystals, sometimes are very good. I remember from last week there were very good ones of part of the face of a lady.
I have your blog open on my other screen over here. I can see some of the pictures.
So it's, every week we are astonished again, and we're doing it already for years. So we have so much on our computers and so on. How much proof do we need? And for this, to bring this image over in the water, we did it collectively with this group, with the participants. We did it with Zoom, because we can't have our normally circle evenings, and where we do experiments, physical experiments. So we said, okay, it's very nice during this COVID time to come together, and so we can connect. It's more nice to be together, but we can connect in different ways. And once a month we did experiments like ITC and EVP and so on, besides what I'm doing. And it's amazing what we are achieving when there is harmony and when we have this connection like this. And for this experiment, it's not only us who needs this frequency, this attunement, so to speak. I also made this, I speak now for myself, this attunement with the spirit world. And I know that the deceased are there, and I know my spirit team, they have to also have their own minds, and also have a kind of find their attunement, let's say so. And we need to connect. So it's not only us, it's not only me, but it's also them who are experimenting and are really do their best to work together. It's a team that really achieved already a lot of miracles. I can write a 3rd book only with all the miracles in it. It's amazing what you can achieve. But if you do an experiment and you involve the spirit world, I mean, not only the local guides that we personally are with us, who are helping us during life. I'm 100%, for me, it's 100% sure that they are there. But that's a different frequency than the spirit world. And the spirit world can reach them, these local guides, and the local guides are not able to on their own to go to that frequency, to that dimension. So they have to give an opportunity to let them through. And then we achieve different things than we have only contact with the guides. Totally different pictures. That's amazing. So if we already influence each other on that level, and we have to ask them to help us, when we are together with someone here in the room, then it's different. And if a third one enters the room, the energy is again different. So we're influencing, and that's what I meant in earlier, in all kinds of way each other, even without knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, I agree. Yeah, I mean, again, in conventional psychology, the attitudes of the experimenters can significantly change the results of an experiment. And the environment does. And what people ate before they did the experiment. Everything interacts with everything else.
Yes. And do you think what people ate, is it also different from person to person? Or is it, generally speaking, you can say, this is the recipe?
Well, I mean, in general, you can say if people have caffeine before, they're going to be mentally more alert. So there are generalities you can make. On the other hand, if you don't know food sensitivities from one person to the next, you cannot say that this particular food is going to work for everyone, because it won't.
No.
It just happens that even coffee with caffeine in it, I don't respond very well to coffee.
No.
So if I need caffeine, I might have soda or something that has it in a different form. So yeah, it's a very complicated process. Fortunately, as I said before, that on average, if you just run lots and lots of experiments, you can slowly begin to see what works for a particular individual and group.
Yes.
If you bring in a new person into a group, the entire dynamics changes.
Absolutely. Yes. So that's why we all need to, in a group, to fit in, so to speak.
Right.
And if not, there's now harm done, then there will be another group where you will fit in. But it's absolutely so. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something also about the coherence of a group.
Mm-hmm.
It's how much are they on the same wavelength, so
Absolutely.
to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a fairly fragile thing to create, but it's probably necessary.
Mm-hmm.
It is certainly true in magical rituals that the whole point of the ritual is to get everybody coherently together on the same path.
Yeah.
And all it takes is one person who's thinking this is stupid,
Yes.
and it won't work.
Absolutely. Of go their own way in their head with their thinking, and it's already the link is difficult to keep that link. Yes, that's so important, especially if you want to do something together in a circle or what kind of experiments. Yes, it's so.
Yeah. So I use the metaphor of anytime you try to do a group experiment, even just two people, it's as though the group is creating a soap bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So the soap bubble is a real thing. It's a real structure, it's a certain shape, but it's really fragile.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to break it.
Absolutely.
As long as the soap bubble is there, all kinds of interesting things can happen.
Yes.
But because of its fragility, it's hard to sustain it.
Yes. So there must be a commitment in the group as well.
Even more than that, though.
More than.
It's because,
What's
as you
more?
said, if someone's attention starts to wander, or they're hungry and they start thinking about food,
Yes.
that could break the bubble.
Absolutely, then it's done. Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's so difficult always to if someone new is coming in the group, to feel and to understand it all. But it's so, yes, absolutely.
But see, I as an experimentalist, I see that as part of the fun, too. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you do an experiment is fun because you're never quite sure what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally everything comes together just perfectly, and you can see very interesting things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Of course.
What I generally do is because I'm not a group leader,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not even an extrovert.
Okay.
I'm an introvert.
Yes.
I'm a typical scientist,
Yes.
but I carry a certain degree of authority when I walk into the laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's partially related to my own confidence. So if I go into the lab and I have a new person who's going to do an experiment, I will project very high confidence that this is going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say it, I just behave that way.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference in terms of how people then will respond.
Absolutely, 100%. And I must think at a lot of examples that I'm with, by example, with someone who is very frustrated and angry, not especially about me, but about something, and I have to be together with the person in the room. Really, I only has to send out this energy that is not judging, him or her, and just be there in this harmony feeling. You can say in this unconditional love feeling, but you don't need to mention that especially. And it will take a while maybe, but it will change. It will change totally. It's amazing. I experienced it several times, yeah.
Sure.
But I must say, at that moment when I achieved to accomplish this, I was not involved emotionally myself with their emotions. I was there, I was witnessing them, but I was not part of them. I think it's more difficult if you are in an argument with someone you care about or you're emotionally involved yourself, then I think it's very hard to bring yourself in that kind of harmony.
Sure.
So
It takes discipline to learn how to do that.
it's absolutely, yeah. But you can use that for the very good. And it will bring much good into your life if you experience how it goes.
Right.
So all the experiences are part of the experiments, isn't it?
Experience and experiment are the same thing.
Yes.
Right. An experiment is a formalized form of experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if the experience from the experiment is wonderful, then you will grow in it and you will go further. You will be more enthusiastic, of course.
Right.
So we love to experience. And of course it has a side that we're maybe not quick satisfied that we had an experience and we want to experience it again and again and again.
Yes.
But that's human-like. We can't blame ourselves for it. But I'm always so thankful every time for every experience, and really that's why I can do it so long already, for years and years, all my life. And every time I'm thankful again for every message and for every experiment that succeeds so well.
Well, that continual attitude of gratefulness is probably important.
Yeah, yes, especially if the spirit world is involved. Absolutely, because they got very enthusiastic then. They understand us, they do not, but it's, that's always the case. People offer their DNA. If you need DNA, they're willing to help you with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in brief about EVP that I'm researching, I understand it as follows. And it's a method for me to actually capture on the computer intelligent thoughts of entities belonging to the living and the deceased. These thoughts appear on recordings and sound like words. The sentences I receive consist mostly till 3 till 12 words. When I ask questions, it's like chatting, and usually it goes very well. Since 2004, I'm doing semi-scientific research on transcommunication, and later that year I raised the Zonneglossis Foundation. And I'm happy with the volunteers who are so important participants in the work. Some have skills of mediumship and others don't. So you don't need to have them to achieve the result in a certain extent. The EVP research I started consists countless experiments. It took me literally thousands of hours of research, and it still continues. It's always in communication with other dimensions, including those of the psychometric field and the dimension where the deceased stays. This particularly good contact has been built up and has been strengthened over the years. The voice recordings are made with the help of a computer and by using different methods, with and without noise, or with and without radio. The achievements are the result of telepathic transmissions. Those are carried by light. Because they are the result of telepathic transmission, we also conduct research experiments with images, ITC, photograph and videos. I should note that in all the work that I have been doing over the years, I receive guidance. My spirit team does that only and exclusively in that matter because I talk about it in my books and bring it out. They find it extremely valuable for humans to gain insight into this knowledge, because this can make a huge difference in the life of man, his fellow man and the world around him. And I sent you just spontaneously a part of EVP you remember, and can you shine your light on this?
I got the files. You sent files with the information, but then you also interpreted the information.
For you separately.
And it was some months ago, and I don't remember what was being said. So you'll have to remind me what your interpretation of of the sounds were.
Yes, it's not so important what being said, but that you can see the possibility that even you, everyone who wants to put time and effort in it, can make anyways contact with their own guides that way. And maybe if they have the skills, and maybe you have the skills, if you want, you can make it with your loved ones who are not around anymore here on earth. So this is amazing, and it is so wonderful how it evolves, how do you say that? And how good it is at the moment. And of course there are days that it's better than other days. And I'm not doing this because of my curiosity. I'm really doing this together with them to show them that it's a kind of evidence that they're still around us and others can hear it, and I can do it while they're here in the laboratory. I'm not afraid to do it anywhere and to repeat it as much as we like, because I know they're there, and of course the frequencies sometimes are better than the others, but it is amazing. And I'm sure you have some, maybe some experience with it. You have?
Yeah. Not that I have run myself, but many other people who do EVP and ITC, I'm aware of their work, and I've seen many examples of it. Because
you bring it like, let's say, proof, and you can collect this proof as a bulk of proof, and it's amazing, and people can see it with their own eyes. It's not only, it's wonderful and we have to collect the data, of course, from all the experiments, but it's so good to watch and to see themselves what they can achieve with it. Don't you think so? That maybe it would be nice if you haven't cooperated in your lab?
No, and the reason why it's not that we don't want to, we'd like to do a lot of things. There's just a limited number of people and a limited number of resources. But the other reason is that it's, in order to act as objective information in a scientific way, you either need people who are highly trained in how to listen, because if you're not, you won't hear anything. You have to be trained to know what to listen to, and we don't know anybody who's going to take the time to become trained.
Okay, so that's very pity, because I have a lot of recordings that if you are used to the Dutch language, people absolutely can hear themselves, even with, okay, they know the sentence, but even if they haven't heard it, that I have spoken it before, they can recognize it. So it's truly worthwhile to dive also in that part, I believe. And
so you are offering yourself to help.
And of course, yes, of course, if you need me by that, on what way I'm doing it, from my free will and from the heart, always helping with these experiments here in the Netherlands, but I will help you if you want to.
As usual, what we end up doing depends entirely on what we're funded to do. So if we can find a donor who's very interested in this topic and can support our work on it, then we probably would do an experiment.
Yes, it's said that always money is involved. It's the way, but for me, this is of course not the issue, because I do it, if I have to do it for money and I need someone to fund it, I will not find it. So it is really something from inside, from serving the spirit world and the people that I'm doing this.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. But we have a team of 7 people and an operation, and there's a pragmatics of how you do it.
Yes, okay. But it's an amazing phenomenon, and it has also something to tell us, like the ITC. And ITC, of course, there are different levels of the ITC. And there are some people who are extremely good in it. By example, Hans Kennis, he is a Dutch parapsycholoog. He is a very good, he is 35 years he was doing this EVP. And he didn't have the skills of, as far as I know, absolutely not skills of mediumship. But he achieved to do a lot. And I will put a link in this video from his website. He has a new website. It's really worthwhile. I will show you the people. Yes? If they have a question for you, because time flies. They have to open their mics. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, you can't see them, but you believe they are here.
Yeah.
And can you, is there someone, I think, Alexandra, you had a question, I believe?
Yes, I have a question.
Can you hear her?
I can.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Radin. How are you doing? My name is Alexandra.
Hello.
My question to you is, I'm very interested in your book that perhaps that you're thinking of doing. Not sure if you're going to do the one on practical magic. How will you be proving this theory behind magic? Have you thought about how you will prove it?
Well, first of all, in science, we don't prove anything. All we do is provide evidence at various levels of confidence.
Okay,
So,
how will you provide the evidence?
Right. So how do we demonstrate then that various techniques work is come up with an idea and try it in the lab. And we probably do it again and again. So when it comes to magical methods, we would refine traditional methods used in magic, especially things like spell casting. So spell casting in a traditional sense means following a prescribed set of words. And the words are an intention. So we can say, okay, we'll give you a very specific intention. We'll have some kind of a target system that would respond to the intention. It could be the growth of plants, it could be the structure of water, it could be all kinds of different things. And then we can ask people to repeat the spell, which again is just a written statement, and then see whether or not the system responds. And so there are many, many variations on ways of doing that. But in some respects, many of the experiments that we already do and that have already been published, they're already like that. They usually don't involve words as a spell, but they do involve intention. You know, we give instructions to look at this display in the computer and make this line go in a certain direction. Well, that's pretty much like a spell, except it's not using those terms. So, as I wrote in my book, Real Magic, there is enough already known in terms of tests that have been done to be able to write what amounts to prescriptions at this point that will probably work. But I will feel more confident if we cast them in terms of actually doing a magical practice and see if it continues to work. It might even work better because it give people a context for what they're doing rather than simply making it a silly laboratory experiment.
I understand now. Just listening to you, I have realized what we're actually doing in Terra Mystica with Lonneke. We're actually doing something similar because before we actually set out to take the pictures, we actually create an intention. We create an intention of, at the very beginning, our intention is nothing. It's blank. And then later, when we're presented with a picture of the loved one, then later our intention is on that particular person. In addition, prior to that, I forgot to mention that the sender of the intention also sets out an intention of a particular object. That particular object we're not aware of. However, repeatedly we actually see that object in our pictures, in our ITC, over and over. This has happened. And for me, this is all new to me. And I am so amazed by this. What you're saying, what you just said, is exactly what we're doing. And I'm proposing something for you. Would you be interested in taking a short little vacation to Holland and participating in these experiments, or even doing it via Zoom, and just for your own personal experience? Because what we do is exactly what you just stated. We set out that intention, and then we look for the findings in the water. And I have been amazed, Dr. Radin, of what I've seen. I have been amazed.
Yeah, well, it is amazing. I would feel better if we actually understood how it works. We're working on what we think are mechanisms, but we don't really understand how it works. But that it works is pretty clear. So we're not doing experiments explicitly in the way that you are. I mean, it's a very interesting style, but we're doing some very similar things. And generally, like if we use water, for example, as a target, we're able to look at the molecular structure of the water before and after it is intentionally influenced. And we do see changes in it. So we're talking down at the level of molecules. You're talking more about the level of the pattern of the water and whether or not it shows a shape, which is at a much higher level than what we're looking at. But in principle, it's about the same thing.
Okay, thank you so much, Alexandra.
Alexandra lives in America.
Yes, Alexandra lives in America. Yes.
Yes,
thank you.
I live in the States.
Yes, you do.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Lonneke.
Yes, and of course you're welcome to join a Zoom if you want to experience for once, one evening. Then, if you like, feel welcome.
Well, when I was younger, I spent 4 months in Eindhoven.
Yes.
Where I worked at the Philips laboratory.
Yes, and you're welcome.
So I'm familiar with the Netherlands at least a little bit, and I have many friends here.
Okay, so maybe if you come to the Netherlands, then don't forget us.
So where are you in the Netherlands?
We're near Amsterdam.
Okay.
It's
No, I have friends in Amsterdam, so yeah.
So don't forget. Thank you very much for our conversation, Dean. We're grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you again, and we sincerely hope to be able to speak to you again in a few months from now about interesting subjects, if it's okay with you.
It'll be my pleasure.
Okay.
All right.
So, thank you so much. And thank you, Eva. And thank you, Siska.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.